was born in Salzburg, worked in different part as a free artist at different courts around Europe, and it was then in Vienna towards the end of his career. He died here, and he composed here in Vienna one of his most famous opera, which is like the Magic Flute. And we're just gonna play a little extract, the Queen of the Night aria, which is believed to be one of the hardest to part for a soprano ever. You see the international sign from here: Italy, Slovenia, Deutschland, Germany. CZ is Czech Republic. So it's a tiny country, but on the crossroad between of various routes. Nowadays, as you can see, there is the classical Vienna, but also the modern Vienna, and a recent, say, ranking that Forbes, the magazine, did. Vienna ranks #1 as the most, as the, say, most livable cities in the world. You know, and in that ranking there was also Vancouver, other cities, but Vienna, there were like different parameters. And Vienna scored, was the top scorer.
Pretty crazy. never actually been inside there for that concert. You know, for other concerts maybe yes, but not for that one. So then on the right hand side there is the fountain that commemorates the opening of the first Vienna water pipe, tap water in the city. Now, it was not always the case because water pipelines were built in the time of Emperor Franz Joseph from the mountains to the city, so that actually the city is supplied 100% by alpine spring water. So any tap you open, you get alpine spring water out. And I know it's very decadent nowadays, you know, with the water situation, but it's simply the way it was in those days. We even flush our toilets with alpine spring water. Please refill your water bottles at the tap, but you know, practically it's the same water. So then behind the fountain is a monument to the unknown soldier, another very important part of our history. That was put up by the Soviets in 1945. So why would we have a monument put up by the Soviets? Well, Austria was part of the German Reich. The Allies were coming from the west and then the east in 1945. The Russians, the Soviets were the first ones to come. They liberated the city. Many soldiers, Soviet soldiers, died. That would of course also include Ukrainians and others that belonged to the Soviet Union in those days. And for those soldiers, the Soviets put up the monument. Yeah? Now, the Western Allies were coming from the west, and because Austria had been part of the German Reich, it was treated exactly like Germany, which means it was divided into 4 sectors for 10 years, just like Germany and Berlin. Vienna and Austria were exactly the same. But here, that didn't last so long, which is the reason why not so many people know about it. In Austria, after 10 years, the treaty was signed also by the Russians. And the Russians, in order to sign the treaty, insisted in Austria becoming a neutral country. So Austria, since 1955, has been a neutral country. And this will also not be changed. Yeah, other like Finland or Sweden, they will not this apply to become member of the NATO. Yeah, so we are of course members of the EU, but not members of the NATO. Yeah? So now we are coming onto the Ring Road, and the Ring Road encircles the old town. You have to use your imagination, and you know, we are still outside of the old town. So whatever you have seen so far is not part of the old town. Now we will turn to the left and we will come onto the Ring Road. But the Ring Road is when former days the fortifications of the city had been. In fact, where the street is used to be the moat. And where you see the buildings on the other side, or if you don't see them yet, once we turn into the Ring Road, you will have them on your right. All these 19th century buildings were practically built on the side of the fortifications and the moat. Yeah? And all that happened in the time of Emperor Franz Joseph, because the old town is so small that walking through doesn't take longer than 15 to 20 minutes, yeah? That does not include any window shopping or shopping time, yeah? So you might take a bit longer, but it is a very small city. And up to the 19th century, mid of the 19th century, this was the capital of an empire which had a population of 54 million people, because it was not only Austria, it was Hungary, Czech Republic, Slovakia, Slovenia, Croatia, northern Italy, parts of Serbia, of Ukraine, of Romania, of Poland. So all this was part of the empire of the Habsburgs family. So then Emperor Franz Joseph decided that having a capital where you walk through in about 20 minutes is not really representative for as a capital for such a big empire. So he gave the order to raise the fortifications, lay out the ring road, and extend the city. And then all these other new districts were created by, uniting smaller villages and making them districts. Yeah. So the ring road itself is 5 kilometers long, about 3.5 miles or something, and there was a lot of space that needed to be filled. So they started building, and the first building to be finished is coming now on the right hand side. It's the Opera House with the green roof that we had seen from further away, just one corner. The Opera House was inaugurated in 1869. Here it is to the right, with the opera Don Giovanni by Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. The two architects who had the Opera House built were not alive when the Opera House was being inaugurated, because the Viennese again didn't like the building, and they looked at it and said, that's what's that? That's a railway station? What's that? Sleeping elephant? So unfortunately, one of the architects took the critics very personally, and he shot himself, and the other one died of a broken heart, both before the inauguration of the building. Yeah. And then here on the right hand side we have Goethe's statue. Goethe was for German what Shakespeare was for English. Yeah, so the poet for the classical German language. And he was German, he never came to Vienna. He didn't think that Vienna was culturally important. But we are nice because we speak the same language, so we have him on the ring road still. Mozart in the park on the right. The park on the right hand side is the former private garden of the imperial family, which belongs to the Winter Palace. That's on the right hand side. On the left hand side we have the Fine Arts Museum and the Natural History Museum. They were both built as museums for the collections of the Habsburgs family. And if you look to the left, you will see there's also in the middle the statue to Maria Theresia, who is looking to the other side to the palace. But from here we will later on start our walking tour to go via St. Stephen's Cathedral, and through the palace in the old town area, so to say. The palace was built in more than 600 years. This is not constant building, but the oldest part goes back to the 1200s, and the name is Hofburg. Do you know the city of Salzburg? Yeah, so Burg we say in German, yeah, Salzburg. Anyway, Burg or Berg is the castle, and so the Hofburg was the castle of the court. Yeah, the Hof is the court people, so the castle of the court. But then they added on to the palace more and more, so that now to the castle, so that now the whole thing consists of 18 buildings and has around 2,600 rooms. Which means if you slept in a different room every night, you'd have to stay with us more than 7 years to use all the different rooms, which is not possible, of course, but just to give you an idea of the size. Then here on the left-hand side we have the Palace Athena statue in front of the Parliament. The Parliament was built like a Greek temple because Greece was the first democracy in the world about 2,500 years ago. And the lady in front is Pallas Athena. In her right hand side she has a little winged statue. That's the goddess of victory. Yeah? Anybody knows the name of the goddess of victory in the ancient Greece? You know what? You all know the name? Nike. Nike, yes, that's where the sporting company's name comes from. So before you run your next marathon, you make sure you get Nike shoes on the side of the winners, okay? Goddess of victory, Nike. On the right hand side we have the Court Theater. That's our largest theater stage in Vienna. and on the opposite is the city hall. I know it looks like a church, but please believe me, it's the city hall. If you see a Gothic spire with a soldier on top, it's the city hall. If there's no soldier, it's St. Stephen's Cathedral. Yeah, that's the other side. In front of the city hall, we always have lots of events happening. In winter time, the biggest Christmas market. Now in summertime, they have like a screen, and there are movies of concerts and opera films being shown there. Yeah? Then on the right hand side is the Landmann Coffee House. Coffee house should be on your agenda while you are in Vienna, even though it stopped raining now. Landmann is a very famous one. Sigmund Freud came here for coffee. He lived only about 15 or 20 minutes walking from here, and he had studied at the university here on the left-hand side. The university is the public university of the city, and we have more than 200,000 students in Vienna out of 1.9 million inhabitants. There is no tuition to university in Vienna, I mean in Austria actually, to public university or schools. And then on the left hand side you see a very impressive new Gothic church, which is called the Votive Church. It was built in the 19th century. What is the name Votive Church? Votive giving is like a thanksgiving. This church was built after some assassination attempt against Emperor Franz Joseph, which he survived. And then his younger brother Maximilian endowed this church here as a Thanksgiving church. Yeah? And Maximilian is the one who maybe some of you have heard of him under the name Emperor Maximilian of Mexico. He was sent to Mexico by Napoleon III in Paris, who was very much influenced by a group of Mexicans living at his court. And there was these funny ideas. You go to the other side of the world and say, oh, hello, I'm the new emperor. Yeah? By the way, the red building on the right-hand side is the former stock exchange building. Yeah? You see on the right. So, supported by the French army, he went there. And as long as the French troops supported him, he was okay. But then under the pressure of the US, they had to retreat, and that's when he was then taken prisoner, and he was executed in Mexico at the age of only 34. That was Emperor Maximilian of Mexico. Well, when he was still here, as said, he endowed this votive church for his brother Franz Joseph, who had survived the attack. Why had there been an attack against Emperor Franz Joseph? Well, Franz Joseph came to the throne as a very young man, 18 years old, as a boy really, after a revolution. Yeah? So here on the left-hand side, the red building, for example, is one of the barracks that Emperor Franz Joseph had built around the city once he had come to the throne at this very young age. There he built 3 barracks around the city. So why was he put on the throne so young? Well, simply because there had been this revolution all over the empire against the Habsburgs. The Habsburgs, that's 1848, the Habsburgs managed to put down the revolution, and then they thought maybe we should at least change the emperor. Because the emperor who had been on the throne at that time was, as you say in English, not the brightest bulb in the chandelier, unfortunately. And that again was because of all the inbreeding. Yeah? The Habsburgs are not famous for victories on the battlefields, but much more for victories in the bedrooms. They always married to the right people in the right time and enlarged their power thus. And in the 1400s, they married into the family of Spain. And then they created a second lineage of the family in Spain. And will keep our blood clean and the countries together. Well, they married, crisscross between those two lineages, and the result, of course, was the so-called Habsburg's lip, or Habsburg's chin, maybe, where the chin and the lower jaw and the lip was so protruding. One emperor, the grandfather of Maria Theresa, who had German palace built, for example, they were saying about him, when it's raining into the emperor's mouth because the poor Leopold couldn't close it. And then some others, were not very bright. Yeah? I mean, honestly, I don't want to say that all the Habsburgs were either stupid or maybe both. But we had these cases. Yeah? Franz Joseph, for example, was a very good-looking young man. And he was also normally intelligent. I mean, I think he was not, he was not an extremely bright person, but he was just a normally intelligent person and very good looking too. Yeah, so it's not. But the Spanish lineage then died out in the year 1700, which I think is not really a miracle after all the inbreeding. But the miracle is more that the Habsburgs here survived all that. And nowadays, of course, it's different, and they are normal people like everyone. Yeah. Okay, so we have reached one part of the Danube. In Vienna we joke, we say we have two seasons, winter time and construction time. And we have a lot of constructions, but the major ones, the really big ones now are because we're building another underground line. We have 5 lines and we're building a 6th one. And many of the major constructions in the city are connected to that underground line. But don't look only to the left. I would like to show you on the right hand side after the trees, you will see an old church. It's the oldest church of the city, which makes it approximately 1,000 years old. Here on the right hand side, it's a bit elevated. It's called St. Ruprecht's Church, and it was built way in the Middle Ages. So when it was built in the Middle Ages, it was built above the river Danube. What does that mean? Now you see a small part of the Danube here on the left-hand side. So imagine that in the Middle Ages, before the Danube was regulated, it was meandering next to the city. It had 6 or 7 strains that changed with every flood, every year. And the main river was here. This was the navigable arm. Where we are driving used to be water in the Middle Ages, and the water reached, to the church on the right-hand side. But the other side of the coin was that the city suffered a lot from floods. And that's why in the 19th century, in the time of Franz Joseph, the Danube got regulated. They put the former main river into a small bed, which you see here on the left-hand side, and they united smaller arms a little bit away from the city center. It's like 5 minutes driving from here, to make it one big river. And it was actually machinery used, which was also used for the building of the Suez Canal in Egypt. Yeah? And that's why now we don't have any floods anymore in the city. We have 4 arms of the Danube still nowadays, but the river, at least here in Vienna, is very well controlled. If you keep looking to the left, after the trees again on the left-hand side, you will see at the upper part of the Ferris wheel. The Ferris wheel stands in a park. The name of that park is Prater. Maybe you read about it. Prater means meadow. It was a hunting area of the Habsburgs and opened to the public in the late 1700s. There it is now. And this Ferris wheel is very important. It's the second landmark of the city after St. Stephen's Cathedral. Well, you might look at it and say, it's not so big, you know, which is true, I do admit. But it is the only old one still existing in the world from the 1800s. Yeah, so we have the oldest Ferris wheel in the world from 1896-97 when it was built, and it's still operating. Yeah, and it's very safe and it gives very good views of the city. So if you don't want to walk in the old town area, that might also be an option. The Ferris wheel is the least stomach upsetting machine in the Prater, by the way. There's a lot of, there's a fun fear behind. There's a lot of these very exciting rides that you can do there if you need that hype in your life, you know. Yeah, so there's the Ferris wheel, the Urania building, the little white one on the left is it's an astronomy, how do you say it? An observatory, yeah, it's an observatory. And here the big white building on the left-hand side is the former war ministry. We don't have a war ministry in Austria anymore, so this houses other ministries. And up on top of the horse is a man called Field Marshal Radetzky, and he is the one for whom Johann Strauss' father had composed a piece of music which is known as the Radetzky March. Yeah, the Radetzky March was written for this field marshal who served in the Austrian army under 5 different emperors. And Radetzky also brought us the most famous Viennese dish, which actually originates in Italy, where they call it costoletta milanese, which is exactly the same thing like our Wiener Schnitzel, exactly. He got to know it there, he liked it, Franz Joseph liked it, and now it's worldwide known as the Wiener Schnitzel, but it actually comes from Italy. Then on the left-hand side, the red building is the Museum of Applied Art. The Museum of Applied Art is more or less a design museum, yeah, so where you have objects of the everyday use from the 12th to the 20th century. And on the right-hand side, maybe not everyone can see it yet, you will see St. Stephen's Cathedral's spire. So you have to imagine that the ring road, that's what we call the ring, circles around the old town. For the cars, it's a one-way street, so we are always going we're going in one direction, and always the old town is on the right-hand side. Yeah, and what is so hard to imagine nowadays is that whenever you left the fortifications and you went to the left side from our point of view, you were actually in the greens, yeah, and that's why the summer palaces were so close to the city, because they just wanted to get away from the stench of the cities, and that's why they didn't really have to go that far. Horse carriages still in the city, we'll see a few when we walk in the old town. On the left-hand side is the city park, which is 1 out of 5 parks along the ring road. This one here is the largest one, so they realized that we would need greens in the city when they laid out the ring road, and also included some parks. Before we see the monument to Johann Strauss, which is in the park and is the most famous one, if you look to the right side between the two more modern buildings here on the right, you will see a little further in the back a beautiful palais building, a beautiful palace building. This one the Viennese nicknamed the Asparagus Palace because of all the columns. This was the palace of the Coburg family, and the Coburg family nowadays is known as the Windsors. They changed their name. Now on the left is Johann Strauss's monument in the park back there. Johann Strauss the Younger, the gilded Johann Strauss, the one who composed the Blue Danube Waltz, the one whom we call the King of the Waltz. And he used to play in this building on the left-hand side of the park, in this yellow one, which is called the Kursalon, and Kur means cure, therapy, because people would go there for drinking therapies. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. What is a drinking therapy? Yeah. Well, I have. You know, in Austria, like you say sometimes about certain countries, oh, they drink wine and they drink beer. Well, I have to say in Austria, they drink everything. So it's wine or beer or schnapps or whatever. Still, not everyone is a drunkard, of course. And in fact, this building, the Kursalon, was because it was so hard to get good water to drink. And that's why people would go there for drinking cures, to drink good and healthy water. And because the situation was so difficult with the water, Franz Joseph collected ideas how to improve that situation, and he chose, unlikely to nowadays, the most expensive of all ideas, and that was to build those water pipelines from the mountains to the city. And we all thank him a lot for that, because that's the reason why we have all this good water coming out of our taps. So now we come to the place where we have entered the ring road. We'll do a very little part of the ring road again up to the museums, and there we will start our walk through the old town of approximately 40-45 minutes or so, so that you get a little bit familiar with the old town as well. And in the old town there's a lot of pedestrian walkway areas, so honestly, if you don't walk in Vienna, you don't really get to see enough of the old town. Here on the left-hand side, there's the Imperial Hotel coming, which is the oldest hotel on the ring road, opened in 1873. And exactly 100 years later, the oldest McDonald's was open here on the left-hand side in 1973. Yeah. The Imperial Hotel, you know, the presidential suite costs, I don't know, 5,000 euros a night or something. This is apparently not enough to give breakfast as well, so that rate does not include breakfast. Yeah. So luckily there's McDonald's right next to the around the corner. How much do we pay for breakfast? 3-4 euros. So, okay, so here is the Opera House. As we continue straight, please look to the right, because you will then again see St. Stephen's Cathedral, and we will be finishing our walking tour on that street towards St. Stephen's. So we will pass St. Stephen's and then just walk up a little bit that street, and this is what we will be finishing our tour, which means you then of course have the option to go back to St. Stephen's if you want to join a service. There's a service always at 12 o'clock, or you want to come up here to the Opera House. Behind the Opera House exactly is the Sacher Hotel, which is the other very prestigious hotel in the city, where they produce that torte, which is called the Sacher torte. That's a chocolate torte with apricot lining and chocolate cover, and they bake incredible 370,000 cakes every year. Yeah? So here on the right hand side you'll see down there St. Stephen's. The white building behind the Opera House is the Sacher Hotel. Here is the Opera House. Okay, and as said, we will be finishing our tour there on that street. And over on the left side, down this road, you come straight to the markets that we had passed. Yeah, just in case you want to go there. Okay, so now. When we stop, please put on your whispers. We are going to use our whispers again for the walking tour. There are a couple of dark clouds still around, so I don't know. Of course, unfortunately, I cannot tell you whether it will be raining or not, but it looks as if it was better to really take a umbrella with you. Even though now we will be walking down to the right where it looks a bit brighter, but again.
You want one?
Come marching in, come marching in. Wanna be in that number? Says come marching in. Glory, glory, hallelujah. His truth is what you want. මේ තියෙන්නේ මේ රෙස්ටුරන්ට් එකට ආපු සෙලිබ්‍රිටීස්ලගේ ෆොටෝස්.